Welcome to Healing from Emotional Abuse, the award-winning podcast that sheds light on the journey from victim to survivor. I'm your host, Marissa F. Cohen, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this empowering and healing adventure. The Healing from Emotional Abuse podcast isn't just another conversation. It's a sanctuary for those who have endured abuse and are determined to reclaim their lives. Through interviews with inspiring survivors, experts, and advocates, we aim to break the silence surrounding abuse and empower our listeners with the knowledge, support, and resources they need to break free from their past. Our mission is to provide a safe space where survivors can share their stories, find solace in knowing they're not alone, and discover the strength within themselves to heal and thrive. Each episode is filled with powerful narratives, practical strategies, and compassionate guidance to help you overcome the lingering effects of abuse and build a brighter future. It brings me immense joy to announce that the Healing from Emotional Abuse podcast has been honored with the prestigious Purple Ribbon Award for Outstanding Domestic Violence Podcasts by DomesticShelters.org, recognizing our commitment to raising awareness about abuse and offering hope to survivors worldwide. We have hit top 10% globally and top podcast in 25 countries. This accolade is a testament to the incredible guests who have shared their stories and the tremendous support from our devoted listeners. Thank you so much. Whether you're a survivor seeking healing, a friend or family member wanting to understand and support, or an advocate dedicated to creating a safer world, this podcast is for you. Our conversations delve into topics such as emotional, physical, financial, and psychological abuse, recovery techniques, self-care strategies, legal rights, and much more. Join us as we embark on this transformative journey together. Subscribe to Healing from Emotional Abuse on your favorite podcast platform, and remember, your story matters, and you have the power to break your silence from the chains of abuse. I'm your host, Marissa F. Cohen, and this is Healing from Emotional Abuse. Let's reclaim our lives and empower one another. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Healing from Emotional Abuse podcast. I'm your host, Marissa F. Cohen. And before we jump into the podcast that I recorded earlier today, I mentioned that no Epstein affiliates or co-conspirators had been arrested, but that has been changed. Prince Andrew, or former rather, Prince Andrew has been arrested this morning for his ties to Epstein. So listening to the podcast, I mentioned a few times that nobody has been arrested, nothing has been, done, and this is the first arrest of all of the co-conspirators. So I just wanted to clarify that before you jump in, because that part is now inaccurate, and I wanted to rectify that. So we do have one arrest, which is a good start. So thank you for tuning in to the Healing from Emotional Abuse podcast today. Enjoy this episode and continue to support the survivors. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Healing from Emotional Abuse podcast. I'm your host, Marissa F. Cohen, and today I need to talk to you, not at you, not around you, but to you, because over the last several weeks, my inbox has been flooded. You've been sending me messages about the Epstein files, asking what I think, asking what it means, asking if this finally changes things. And I'm going to be honest, I am at a hotel in Texas before a speaking engagement later today, and I overheard a conversation at breakfast asking, well, why don't the survivors just come forward? Why don't they just say the names? Why don't they just do that? And I want to be honest with you, my feelings about this are complicated because yes, the files matter, the documents matter, the records matter. Survivors coming forward always matters. Our voices matter. But I want to spend this episode talking about something that I think gets lost every single time one of these major stories break. The documents do not save the survivors,
We save the survivors, our beliefs, our empathy, our refusal to let them be alone. And today I'm going to tell you why I think we have it backwards, why our obsession with the list and the files and the names keep missing the entire point. Because as long as we treat this story like a conspiracy thriller instead of a human rights crisis, we are failing every single person who came forward, every person still too afraid to speak, and every person who has carried their story to their grave. Let's get into it. Let me give you the background first because you deserve the facts. I've been following this case for years, watched all the documentaries, and read a ton of the articles. Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy financier who, by his own guilty plea and the conviction of his primary accomplice, ran a sexual abuse and trafficking ring that exploited dozens and likely far more underage girls and young women for years. He owned multiple properties across the world, including a private island in the US Virgin Islands that we call Epstein Island, that was only accessible by boat or helicopter. He built a vast social network that included presidents, royalty, Nobel Prize winning scientists, tech billionaires, and celebrities. And he used that wealth and those connections as a shield. In November of 2025, Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act by a near unanimous vote. It was 427 to 1 in the House and unanimous in the Senate. The law required the Department of Justice to release all unclassified Epstein-related records within 30 days. The law specifically stated that no records could be withheld simply because they would cause embarrassment or reputational harm to public figures. By January 30th of 2026, so like a couple weeks ago, over 3.5 million pages had been released, along with more than 2,000 videos, 180,000 images, flight logs, emails, FBI interview notes, financial records, island blueprints. And according to PBS NewsHour reporting, the documents included Epstein's communications with former White House advisors, tech billionaires, including Bill Gates and Elon Musk, NFL team co-owners, and countless other public figures. The House Oversight Committee separately released tens of thousands of pages from the Epstein estate, and Bloomberg News independently obtained 18,700 emails from one of Epstein's personal Yahoo accounts. That's the headline. That's what everyone's talking about. Now, here's what I need you to understand. None of it has resulted in a single new criminal charge. None of it has meant that a single new survivor has received justice. The survivors themselves, the actual women and girls whose bodies and lives were taken from them, issued a public statement criticizing the release because it made them too easy to identify, while Epstein's alleged enablers continue to be protected by secrecy and redactation. In perfect delete fashion, they redacted the names of all of the perpetrators while releasing the names of all of the survivors. Hear this again. The survivors, the people this was supposed to protect, said the files release hurt them more than the predators. That tells us everything we need to know about who our justice system is actually designed to protect. Here's the part of this conversation that I need us to sit with because it is deeply uncomfortable. Powerful men have been getting away with sexual violence for centuries, not decades, centuries. And the mechanisms that protect them have barely changed. Wealth, social status, legal access, a culture that demands women prove their credibility before their pain is even acknowledged. The strategic destruction of accusers' reputations, settlements with non-disclosure agreements, prosecution deals negotiated in secret. The Epstein case is not an anomaly. It is a masterclass in how the system has always worked. Let me walk you through how it played out in this specific case because the details are important. In March of 2005, the Palm Beach Police Department began investigating Epstein. The FBI opened a full investigation in July 2006. A career federal prosecutor named Marie Villafana drafted a 60-count federal indictment and fought for the victims at every turn. By the time negotiations began, at least 30 victims had been identified. And then, according to the Department of Justice's own Office of Professional Responsibility Review and reporting by PBS, ABC News, and NPR, the system did what it does for the wealthy, connected men. U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, a Bush appointee, negotiated a secret non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. Epstein pleaded guilty to two minor state-level prostitution charges, charges that legally described the children he abused as prostitutes. He served approximately 13 months in a county jail under a work release arrangement that allowed him to leave the facility for up to 16 hours a day. He just got to go home. The federal investigation was shut down entirely, and the agreement granted immunity not just to Epstein, but unnamed potential co-conspirators. The victims were never told. When the deal was signed, they didn't know it had happened. They found out from the news. Villafana, the prosecutor who had fought for them, was overruled. Epstein's high-powered legal team, including a Harvard law professor, had been granted extraordinary access to senior prosecutors in meetings that the prosecutor vehemently opposed. She was overruled. A federal judge would eventually rule in 2019 that the deal violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act. The DOJ's own review called it poor judgment. Victims' rights attorneys called the review a whitewash. The attorney representing more than 50 of Epstein's accusers told ABC News the report was offensive and hurtful. Acosta resigned from his post as Trump's labor secretary in July of 2019 under public pressure, but was never criminally charged. He testified before the House Oversight Committee in September of 2025, and according to the Democratic committee members, declined to admit any wrongdoing and expressed no remorse. I want you to let that land. 30 identified child victims, a 60-count indictment that was ready to go, and the man who negotiated away served as a cabinet secretary for 2 years, then testified before Congress and still won't say he did anything wrong. That is not an Epstein story. That is a story about power. That story has been told in every culture, in every century, in every corner of the world. Releasing files does not dismantle the system that created them. I want to stop talking about the documents and start talking about people, because every page in those 3.5 million files represents a human life. And the ones I want to center around are not the powerful men whose names are trending on social media. I want to talk about the survivors. Virginia Giuffre. Virginia was 16 years old in the summer of 2000 when she was working at the spa at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. According to her own testimony, lawsuits, and her memoir, she was approached by Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's girlfriend and partner in his trafficking operation, who groomed her and recruited her into Epstein's world. For approximately 2 years, Virginia was trafficked, sexually abused by Epstein, and she alleges loaned to powerful men in his circle. In her own words, written in her memoir, I needed him not to be a selfish, cruel pedophile, so I told myself he wasn't one. That's not a broken person speaking. That is someone describing with extraordinary clarity and painful self-awareness the psychological mechanism of surviving abuse, the way our minds protect us from what we cannot face. Virginia came forward publicly in 2011, the first of the victims to give up her anonymity. She did it, she said, because the birth of her daughter in 2010 made her feel she had no other choice. She became a tireless advocate. She sued Epstein. She sued Maxwell. She testified in Paris in 2021 in proceedings against French modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel, who was also accused in her account. She told the court, I wanted Brunel to know that he no longer has power over me. She provided critical information to law enforcement that contributed to Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction in 2021. Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for her role in recruiting and grooming young girls. Virginia helped make that happen. And for 16 years, she was called a liar. Her credibility was attacked. Her memories were questioned. The men she accused, powerful, wealthy men with expensive lawyers, denied everything and attacked her reputation publicly and in court. The final years of Virginia's life were marked by personal devastation. She had moved to Australia, married, and had 3 children, but by 2024, she and her husband had reportedly separated. She publicly alleged he had been physically abusive. The court granted him a restraining order and custody of her children. In 2025, she announced she'd been in a serious car accident, said doctors had given her days to live, and later recovered. She spoke to People magazine about her isolation and her pain. On April 25th, 2025, Virginia Giuffre died by suicide at her farm in Western Australia. She was 41 years old. Her family statement said she lost her life to suicide after being a lifelong victim of sexual abuse and sex trafficking. Virginia was a fierce warrior. She was a light that lifted so many survivors. In the end, the toll of abuse is so heavy that it became unbearable for Virginia to handle its weight. Her memoir, Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, was published in October of 2025. It became a bestseller. In it, she described abuse that began in her own childhood. She alleged she was abused starting at age 7 and traced how a childhood shaped by violence and betrayal made her vulnerable to exploitation. She never saw the Epstein File Transparency Act. She never saw 3.5 million pages released. She never saw the list. And I need to ask, what did we give her while she was alive? Did we believe her loud enough? Did we protect her hard enough? Did we make her feel less alone? Other women spoke up too at enormous personal cost. Courtney Wild was recruited at age 14, a literal child, and says she was abused multiple times over 2 years. She was one of the Jane Does who sued the DOJ for violating the Crime Victims' Rights Act. Jennifer Arose came forward publicly in 2019, saying she was approached near her school in New York City by a woman who worked for Epstein and was raped by him when she was 15. Shantae Davies, a massage therapist who traveled on Epstein's private jet, has spoken publicly about being sexually assaulted and about the system's failure to protect women he abused. Dozens more settled civil suits for undisclosed amounts, their names protected, which they both needed and deserved. One group of survivors issued a statement about the January 2026 file release, saying they were being re-traumatized while Epstein's enablers remained shielded. As survivors, we should never be the ones named, scrutinized, and re-traumatized while Epstein's enablers continue to benefit from secrecy, they wrote. And they're right. Now I want to widen this lens because the Epstein story doesn't exist in isolation. It exists inside a pattern, a centuries-old pattern of powerful men abusing, being accused, and then being protected. And since we're on the subject, I think it's important to talk about the only case in US history where a jury has rendered a civil verdict of sexual abuse against a sitting president. E. Jean Carroll is a writer and former magazine columnist. In June 2019, she published an article in New York Magazine alleging that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her in the dressing room of Bergdorf Goodman department store in New York City in either 1995 or 1996. Trump's response was immediate. He said it never happened, that he'd never met her, and that she wasn't his type. A photo from a 1987 party showing Trump and Carroll together was promptly published. Carroll filed 2 civil lawsuits. The second one, filed November 2022 under New York's Adult Survivors Act, a law passed specifically to allow sexual assault survivors to file civil suits beyond the statute of limitations, went to trial in April 2023. Trump did not attend the trial. He submitted a video deposition in which he called Carroll a nut job, a whack job, and mentally sick. He called her allegations a hoax and a con. After deliberating for less than 3 hours, a jury of 6 men and 3 women unanimously found Trump liable for sexually abusing Carroll and defaming her. They awarded her $5 million. A follow-up defamation trial in 2024, specifically over his continued public statements denying the assault, resulted in an $83.3 million award. Total damages, $88.3 million. In December 2024, the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the jury's findings. The court noted that testimony from 2 other women who had described similar encounters with Trump established a pattern the court described as an ordinary conversation, an abrupt lunge, forcible touching without consent. Carroll's case did not result in criminal charges. It was a civil case. Trump was not imprisoned. The verdict is under appeal, and in November of 2024, after being found liable for sexual abuse by a jury, he was elected President of the United States for the 2nd time. I'm not asking you to take a political position. I'm asking you to reckon with what that tells us about how we value survivor stories. Carroll's not the only woman to have made allegations. At least 25 women have accused Trump of various acts of sexual misconduct since the 1970s, including a former apprentice contestant, a former campaign staffer, a woman who worked in or attended events at his beauty pageants, and many, many others. A woman identified only as Jane Doe filed and then withdrew a lawsuit alleging she was raped by Trump and Epstein together at age 13, citing multiple threats she received. His first wife, Ivana Trump, alleged in a 1990 deposition during their divorce that he violated her. She later publicly walked back the characterization. She passed away in 2022. Every single one of these women had their credibility challenged. Every single one of them was called a liar. Every single one of them paid the price for speaking. This is the pattern Epstein, Trump, Harvey Weinstein, R. Kelly, Bill Cosby, Jerry Sandusky, Larry Nassar. The names change, the protection mechanism does not. So here's where I want to land because I don't believe in leaving you in despair. That's not what this podcast is about. I want to talk to you about what actually changes things because it is not 3.5 million pages. It is not a client list. It is not a flight log, and it is not trending social media. What changes things is what Virginia Giuffre asked of us before she died. She said the reckoning she was asking for is the one that lives in our daily choices, in how we respond when someone tells us they were hurt, in whether we believe them or our first instinct is to ask, what were they doing? Why didn't they leave sooner? Why they waited to come forward? What they were wearing? Whether they're sure. Researcher Chloe Lacken at Northeastern University said it plainly after Virginia's memoir was released. How hard is it for victims to come forward? Just disclosing the abuse is an incredibly courageous thing to do. If you disclose, you might get threatened, you might not be believed, you might get victim blamed. False disclosures are incredibly rare. Like 2% of disclosures are false. So there's never really a legitimate reason for someone not to be believed. Let that be your operating principle. There is never really a legitimate reason not to believe someone. Think about what Virginia Giuffre's life looked like. She came forward in 2011. She spent 16 years fighting. She helped put Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. She sued a prince and she settled. She wrote a memoir from her deathbed so that her story would survive her. And in the end, she lost custody of her children. She lost her health. She lost her sense of safety. And she died alone on a farm in Western Australia at 41 years old. What could we have done differently? What can we do differently starting today? We can stop treating survivors like witnesses in a case that isn't ours to judge. When someone tells you they were hurt, your job is not to evaluate the evidence. Your job is to say, I believe you. I'm here. How can I support you? We can stop making these stories about the powerful men and start making them about the people who were harmed. Every time we spend more energy debating whether a name on a flight log means anything than we spend honoring the survivors who came forward, we are getting it wrong. We can advocate for the legal protections that give survivors actual tools, laws like New York Adult Survivors Act that allowed E. Jean Carroll to have her day in court, laws that extend statute of limitations so survivors who so often cannot come forward immediately because of trauma, fear, power imbalances, and NDAs have time to find their voice. We can demand that institutions, universities, law enforcement, the justice system, the halls of government stop treating accusations against powerful people as inconveniences to be managed and start treating them as crises demanding accountability. And we can hold the reckoning in our own hearts because the culture that allowed Jeffrey Epstein to operate for decades, that allowed 30 identified child victims to watch their abuser receive a secret sweetheart deal that allowed Virginia Giuffre to fight alone for 16 years, that culture lives in all of us. In every eye roll at survivors who waited too long, in every, but it seemed like such a good guy, in every reluctance to name abuse as abuse when the accused is someone we admire. The files are evidence, but evidence without a culture willing to act on it changes nothing. I want to close by reading you something that E. Jean Carroll said when she testified at her trial. She said, I'm here because Donald Trump raped me, and when I wrote about it, he said it didn't happen. He lied and shattered my reputation, and I'm here to try and get my life back. She was 79 years old when she said that. She'd been waiting nearly 30 years to say it in a room where someone had to listen. That is what it costs to come forward. 30 years, your reputation, your sense of safety. Sometimes, as we saw with Virginia Giuffre, your life. The least we can do is make sure that when someone finally speaks, we are ready to listen, not to judge, not to audit, not to wait for the files, just to listen. The survivors are the files, their lives, their stories, their courage. That's the evidence that matters most. And it's on us to treat it that way. If you've been affected by any of the topics on today's episode, please reach out for support. You can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide Crisis Lifeline at any time. RAIN's hotline is 1-800-656-HOPE. You do not have to carry this alone. You are not alone. If you know a survivor, love them loudly, believe them, and show up for them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work with me, and take care of yourselves.
Thank you so much for joining us on this empowering episode of Healing from Emotional Abuse. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to support your journey towards healing and growth. We want to express our deepest, heartfelt gratitude to all of our incredible guests who have continued to bravely share their stories, as well as to our devoted listeners who have supported us on this remarkable adventure. Your unwavering commitment to breaking the silence and healing from emotional abuse, surrounding abuse and sexual assault, and promoting a world free from violence is truly commendable. We would also like to remind you that in addition to the podcast, we offer personalized one-on-one and group coaching services to support your healing journey. Our compassionate and experienced coaches are here to provide guidance, tools, and a safe space for you to explore your path towards empowerment and well-being. Visit our website at www.coachingwithmarissa.com. That's www.coaching, COACHING, with WITH, Marissa, MARISSA.com to learn more and book a coaching session. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Reach out to support networks, seek professional help, and always remember your worth and strength. Only about 7% of survivors seek resources. We need to up that number. Healing is possible, and together we can break the chains of abuse and build a brighter future. We invite you to stay connected with us on social media to continue the conversation and receive updates on future episodes, resources, and community events. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and ask Marissa at www.marissafaycohen.com. That's www.marissa, MARISSA, Faye, FAYE, Cohen, COHEN.com. Thank you once again for being a part of our community, and remember, your story matters. Let's continue to uplift, inspire, and empower one another. This concludes another transformative episode of Healing from Emotional Abuse. Until next time, I'm your host, Marissa F. Cohen, and together we can live free, confident, and peaceful lives after abuse and assault.